President Trump is defending his 25% tariff on steel imports, claiming they're bringing trillions of dollars of businesses back to the U.S. This comes as the impacts of those tariffs are already being felt in places like Ohio, where many workers rely on the steel industry. Jason Carroll is out front.
I'm very optimistic, and I agree.
You're optimistic?
I am. I'm extremely optimistic.
Optimistic? Not the word some might use to describe their outlook on the economy, given all the back and forth with tariffs. But here at Swanton Welding, just outside Toledo, Ohio, the company's owner, Norman Zeiter, says thanks to Trump's tariff tactics, he and his workers are feeling good about the future of the business, despite all the ups and downs on Wall Street.
Wall Street affects us to a certain extent.
All right, so I haven't watched this yet. All right, so let's see. Let's see how they pivot on this, right? They're going to go to steel, which is doing a protection of tariffs, which, again, I disagree with. The reciprocal tariff I'm fine with. That'll help bring about, free trade. Protectionist tariff, I can understand it for the steel industry, just because it's a vital. If you get into a war, you need to be able to ramp up your steel production. So I can kind of understand giving a little bit of leverage to things that are like a national security, issue, whether it be steel, whether it be medication, whether it be chip manufacturing, things of that nature. I can get it. I can kind of get on board with it, like a small edge to the American companies. But let's see where CNN goes with this.
But not a lot.
Welders like Ethan Sanderson also feeling bullish, hoping all that is happening with tariffs will eventually mean more work and income for people like him, which cannot come soon enough, given he's about to be a new father.
Once everything gets sorted out, that it'll help us out in the long run.
Swanton Welding has been a part of this community since Zeiter's grandfather, a World War II veteran, started it back in 1956 with just $100 in his pocket. Maintaining it has been tough. The U.S. Steel and wide swaths of the manufacturing industry have been on the decline for decades due to factors such as declining demand and the inability to compete in global markets. Toledo once buzzed during the steel manufacturing heyday in the 1950s. Now, the unemployment rate is 6.6%, compared to the national average of 4.1%.
We're one of the last standing ones in this area.
Still standing and getting a boost from Trump's tactics. Zeiter says 5 international companies have already reached out to do business.
We had Italy, we had France, we had Great Britain. We had a Canadian company reach out to us.
You had a Canadian company?
Yeah.
He says it's the first time in 70 years a Canadian company has called wanting to work with them. Across town at Wurzel's bike shop, owner Jill Wurzel also has heard from an overseas distributor.
I just got that a few minutes ago before you came in, and I was reading it, and I about had a heart attack.
Wurzel received an email from a Taiwanese company informing her if tariffs do go into effect, she may have to pay an increase of up to 79%.
That's a huge impact on a small business.
She buys from China, Taiwan, and Cambodia and worries how tariffs would impact costs to customers and her ability to maintain her staff.
Payroll would be reduced and somebody might lose their job, or a full-time person will be part-time.
The Wurzel family has been in the bike business for 80 years since her grandfather.
See, that's an interesting take, right? So obviously they're importing all this stuff. So the people that it's going to affect a lot when it comes to these types of tariffs and tax are going to be the distribution side. Whereas like we make bicycles here, but they're more expensive, right? Because of labor, because of quality, because of those things. So there may have to be some sort of a shift, right? If there's a 79% tariff, then maybe she's going to buy more American bikes or stuff like that. But this is all baked in. And the other factor is that it's not that we're trying to make, I don't think for the most part, people have an issue with buying, cheap shit bikes from overseas. The issue is we cannot sell our higher end bikes or whatever it is that we sell to them because of the tariffs they impose on us. So if we are trying to balance this thing out, what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, we don't mind buying your shit. We just like it if you allow a fair back and forth where you could buy some of our shit, right? That's the bottom line. The bottom line is we don't want to make, I think I've said this a million times. We don't want to make tube socks, cheap tube socks. We're not into that. We're not going to have somebody in a factory sewing or doing that kind of stuff. We've gone past that. They still have a poorer, lower skilled labor force that are doing like menial factory industrial style jobs. That's what they have. Fine. You can do that, but still allow us to sell you our maybe higher end stuff. Like why do you have to impose a tariff on us? If it's not good for us imposing it to you, why is it good for you to impose it on us? Right? So that's where this it's been pretty balanced. Let's see where they end this.
Father founded it in 1945. The threat of tariffs now a concern for a new generation of employees. Wurzel's nephew and his wife just quit their jobs a few weeks ago to join the family business.
We're a little bit nervous, but we trust in Jill. We know that she knows this business really well.
Back at Swanson Welding, also a new generation, one hoping Trump's tactics will benefit their industry. Allison Fagerman is an 18-year-old welder who works with her father.
I'm hoping that it gets better, and I'm sure it will. I feel like we're on a bumpy road, and eventually we'll get to a smoother road.
Jason Carroll, CNN, Toledo, Ohio.
President Trump's trade war entered a new level of confusion over the last 72 hours, which probably has something to do with comments like this.
Look, I'm a very flexible person. I don't change my mind, but I'm flexible. And you have to be. You just can't have a wall and you'll only go, no, sometimes you have to go around it, under it, or above it.
Now, let me give you the backstory here. The president was being asked today in the Oval Office about tariffs on electronics because late on Friday night, U.S. Customs and Border Protection announced that electronics imported to the United States, like smartphones and computer processors, would be exempt from those reciprocal tariffs that were put in place. A seemingly big win for tech giants like Apple, which mostly makes iPhones and other products in China. But then on Sunday, we heard from the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, who argued this.
These are included in the semiconductor tariffs that are coming, and the pharmaceuticals are coming. Those two areas are coming in the next month or two. So this is not like a permanent sort of exemption.
The Commerce Secretary arguing it's not a permanent exemption, as Trump himself posted later on, quote, nobody is getting off the hook, as he warned of new tariffs on semiconductors. But it's not just with electronics that we're talking about the back and forth here. We also saw the stocks of the big three automakers on the rise today after the president floated the possibility of exemptions for car companies that had been hit by his 25% auto tariffs.
I'm looking at something to help some of the car companies where they're switching to parts that were made.
I think people are just, you know, you say what you want. Say it's a back and forth. Say, you know, whatever. I think the volatility is part of the deal, right? The volatility and the waning, the you know, the not a direct line of, because you got to understand, guys, when you're negotiating, you can't open yourself up. You can't have just put all the cards on the table. There's a balancing act between trying to keep favorability, right, over his populace, over the people that you know like him, because people that don't like him are just never going to like him. That's fine. There's a balancing act between keeping the favorability of those people at a certain level while still being able to, you know, maneuver this deal, whether it be behind closed doors or whatever's in front of the camera. Whatever's in front of the camera, that's also a negotiation tactic, no matter what it is, right? Until it's signed, it's not done, right? So the things that are being said, you know, there's a reason behind. Listen, I'm sure some of it is f-ups. I'm sure that's a case, because there's a lot of different messaging going on. This is a massively complicated issue that people just think it's a tax or this and that. No, it's way more than that, right? We're trying to back China into a corner and basically strong arm them into finally maybe being you know, somewhat of a legitimate partner on the global stage, right? They steal everybody's shit and they sell it back to them. That's not right. It's not right, and it has to stop. The Chinese population is an extremely poor population. The last video I just did, I just pointed out that the lower income of people in the U.S., the poverty line for people in the U.S. is $15,000. The poverty line for people in China is $500 annually. Annually. A poor Chinese per capita makes $500 a year, a couple dollars a day, right? So they need us way more than we need them. That's apparent. Trump is using a ton of his political capital right now to try to push this through. He's been saying this since the 80s. There's been something that he's had in his wheelhouse all that time. He's going to do it. He's not going to back down. He doesn't have to run for re-election. He's not going anywhere. This is going to get done. Maybe, you know, the Chinese can pivot and they can you know, shake and bake and do whatever they got to do at the end of but they need to know at this point, he is not going to back down on this. At least I don't think so. Right? You could look at his Oprah Winfrey interview. I did a video with Nancy Pelosi basically saying the same thing. China is eating our lunch and they're using slave labor and all this stuff like that just to decimate American manufacturing. All right, that's already done. American manufacturing for those cheaper goods and stuff like that and factory line style things is over. But what we can do is we can still get this country on somewhat of a more level playing field than what we're dealing with right now. They're lying, they're cheating, and they're stealing all the way to the bank. And it has to stop.
In Canada, Mexico, and other places, and they need a little bit of time because they're going to make them here.
The president arguing the car companies needed a little bit of time, even though this is what he said last month about those auto tariffs.
Are there any conditions under which you'd remove these auto tariffs, sir, or is this permanent for the rest of your term in office?
Oh, this is permanent, yeah, 100%, yeah.
My source tonight is Jennifer Hillman, the former general counsel at the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, and it's great to have you back here because this has obviously been a huge question here. How much of this has to do with what you just heard from the president at the beginning there? He was saying that he can be flexible, but also he's not going to change his mind.
So
how does the business hear that?
Yeah, exactly. And this is part of the problem because what he's fundamentally saying is he wants everything to be built in the United States. He wants all of these companies to move back their manufacturing operations. But what do business companies need more than anything else if they're going to do that? They need certainty. They need to know exactly what the lay of the land is. They need to know exactly whether, when, and how.
That's impossible. Everyone, I feel like it's such a disingenuous argument. Him just blanketly saying, I want manufacturing back into this country, it doesn't mean he wants everything made here. That's just a stupid thing. If everything was made here, then we could have 100% tariffs on everything because then we wouldn't import anything, right? Obviously, that's not the case. Obviously, we all know that, right? Global trade is a thing. There are countries that don't have things and can't make things and they import them, whether it be raw materials or whether it be the final product themselves, right? For her to say that he wants everything made here is just stupid. Nobody's saying that. He's not saying that. He may say, I want to bring manufacturing back. Okay, that's cool. I mean, does she have an issue with that statement? I would like her to clarify that.
These tariffs are going to be applied and whether, as the question was asked, are they permanent? And yet what we've seen throughout this entire saga.
He can't say that. Once he says something is a permanent thing, I mean, like he did just say with the auto tariffs. But again, it's once you say a definitive thing, and once the deal is done, on the as far as being on screen, being recorded and put it out on television, then they're going to use that against you. The country's going to use that against you.
Is on again, off again, on again, off again, which does just the opposite. It gives everybody a sense of, I'm not going to spend any of my money. I'm going to sit and hold tight and wait and see what happens.
Well, and on the I've talked to people who've said that the president has a point when it comes to pharmaceuticals and semiconductors, because those are two things that if we deeply rely on other nations to provide them to the United States is in real trouble if that access is cut off, obviously. So when it comes to those investigations, the national security investigations, what does that look like for something like this?
So again, we saw these kind of national security investigations in the last Trump administration. I mean, this is how we ended up with the original tariffs on steel and aluminum. So again, that is a full, robust process run by the Department of Commerce that is investigating whether or not the level of imports that are coming in that case of steel and aluminum, creates a risk to the national security of the United States. And again, risk is sort of fairly broadly defined. So that, I think, is what they're thinking they're going to do in both semiconductors and pharmaceuticals, is conduct an investigation, look at how many imports are coming in from where, and do they ultimately threaten the national security of the United States? And if so, then they can put on tariffs. But there's a process. Everybody gets to comment. All the stakeholders get to come in and say, and the Defense Department has to say something. So a very different process.
Okay, we will stay tuned because obviously that would have.
Yeah, man. I don't know. I think this, it's crazy to think that this thing only popped off like 2 weeks ago, and they're losing their shit. They're losing their minds. I mean, the market's all over the place. Everything's all over the place. Nothing has anything even been imported yet with these tariffs. I mean, I was watching videos a day or two ago that basically said almost all the ships in China, they're just sitting there. They're just sitting there. So I'm telling you, the population at large in China is freaking out. Say whatever you want, whatever freak out we're doing over here, they're doing it 4 times as much. Why? Because we buy 4 times as much stuff as they buy from us. That's an absolute fact. They're selling us about $500 billion worth of stuff, and we sell them $100 billion. So we are their cash cow. We are, when everybody knows, right, that when that person walks into the store that spends a lot of money, all the salespeople know who that guy or girl is, and they go over to them and kiss their ass to try to get a sale, to try to get some commission. That's us. We're the ones walking around with the high-end bag going into the high-end store. Everybody knows that we're the ones that buy the stuff, right? So that's why we have the upper hand. China doesn't buy the stuff. They're the person, walking into with no name brand stuff into the brand name store. Everyone's going to ignore them, right? Everyone knows the deal, right? We're the ones walking around with the high-end shit. And we have the money. They have the stuff. They want to sell the stuff. They don't want that stuff to stay there. They can't afford that stuff to stay there. Why? Because then as soon as that stuff starts piling up, what's going to happen? People start getting laid off immediately. Immediately. It's not like over here where, okay, there's a 79%, you heard in I think it was the previous video, or maybe it could have been this one. Oh, no, it was a previous video. 79% increase on bicycles or whatever. And the woman owned a bike shop. And she's like, oh, I may have to lay off a worker or send one part-time. Yeah, okay, that's you missing out on, a couple of bikes. What about the people that are shipping that bike, not just that one store, but to thousands of stores across the country? What do you think is going to happen to them? They can't sell those things anymore. So where we may have a dip, they are going to be decimated. They're going to be destroyed over this. You're talking about, layoffs on a massive scale. You're talking about starvation. If they can insulate themselves from the public and try to keep everything wraps under wraps, which, with the Facebook story coming out is a pretty interesting thing about what, Zuckerberg was doing over there with Facebook and basically, I think there was a hearing on the House today. If they can keep the population under wraps, I'm sure they're going to clamp down right now, really quickly, on anything leaving China. Because I'm telling you, those people have to be freaking out. The business class in China has to be going at Xi and saying, you got to figure this shit out. We're going to lose a lot of money. We're going to lose a lot of money. They probably don't care about the starving people because that's not, their MO. But as far as like losing money, I'm sure they care about. Yeah. Guys, thanks a lot. Give me a like, share, subscribe. We'll do another video real soon. Thanks a lot.